Should you buy now or should you wait? With home prices sitting near record highs and housing affordability sitting near 39-year lows, one of the most popular questions that comes across my channel is the idea of buying now versus waiting, along with the idea that something has got to give. People out there believe that because I can't afford to do something, then no one else can afford to do it. And therefore they believe that something is going to break. There's going to be some sort of housing bubble that's going to burst or some sort of housing crash. So with that, I wanted to cut to an episode that we did with Barry Habib, CEO of MBS Highway, on our podcast channel, The Educated Homebuyer, where we did a 32-minute video talking about things like affordability, house prices crashing, as well as where mortgage rates are heading. And what I did here was took a clip from that video where I basically asked Barry about the idea of housing affordability, when it's going to improve, along with the idea of people waiting for the perfect scenario in order to buy a house. So with that, let's cut to Barry and see what he had to say.
Well, I think it might be instructive to take a peek at just some of that by using some visuals. So let's try and address those. And I'm going to go quickly here because I feel that if we were to take a look at this and go quickly, the first thing that's important is understanding that home prices are not going to crash. So we'll take a look at that. It'll probably take a few minutes, but then I'd also like to address the cost of waiting and why it's not a good idea to wait. You see, people will say, well, I think it's better off for me to wait. The problem with that is that if you wait, then and you wait for a lower rate to occur, right? Forget about the prices dropping because I'm going to show you why prices won't decline. But if you wait for a lower rate, the National Association of Realtors has good statistics on this. For every 1% drop in rates, 5 million more people come to market. So if you think inventory is tight and you think there's pricing pressure now, what happens when you have a lot more potential buyers? Certainly not all of them will buy. That is just going to make inventory even more sparse, but also drive prices up higher. And the thing that people don't recognize is the actual cost, which I will get into with you. But the first thing I'm going to do is take it one step at a time here. And let's address the issue of, is there going to be a crash? And let's see why, with facts, not with fiction, why that happens. So I think one of the money managers was Jeremy Grantham, well-respected, say 30% drop in prices. So he said, and the reason is, we talked about this because he says growing inventory. Well, inventory, as I explained to you, this is the last 10 years. You could see a pattern here. Every year we go up between the months of September to March, and then it comes down every single year over and over and over and over and over again. So this is a normal process, and we explained that. Well, then he says, 6.5% of homes have a reduction in asking price. Well, we always have markets where asking prices, some of them are reduced. Maybe some need repair, or they're not in good condition, or perhaps the price was put up there too aggressive. So yes, there will be always a percentage. But by the same token, if we flip the script for a second and say, okay, so you're pointing out that 6.5% have a reduction, that means that 93% are indeed selling at their listing price or higher. In fact, of this 93%, 32% of this total is selling above asking price. So we're not in a situation where prices are coming down. But again, the media wants to just push out the bad news. They want to compare it to 2007 crash, but there were 4 million units for sale. Today, there's just 1.1 million units for sale. But that doesn't tell the whole story. When you look at what the population was in the United States in 2007, it's 301 million people. So what's happened to population? Between then and today, we've gained 34 million more people, but inventory has dropped by 3 million, dropping from 4 million to 1 million. So this is another point as to you're getting this pricing pressure to the upside because there's simply more demand than supply, even though some people are now not qualified where they would have been with lower rates. There's still enough people that are qualified to overwhelm the amount of inventory available. But even this doesn't tell the whole story because about 35% of the units in inventory are under contract. In this big country, there's only 737,000 actual listings. So how does that compare? Here's where we are. Here's where we were before COVID. It's about half of what we were pre-COVID. And that's certainly going to put pricing pressure to the upside. So let me just show you this chart, which is the one I wanted to show you from before. Everybody worries about this period of time. But in the last 81 years, the green's up years, this was kind of flat. So you got 75 up years, one kind of flat, and 5 down years. But people are saying, oh, well, prices went up, so that means they've got to go up. But here's the thing. If you looked here, they went up 118%. I know we went up 40% in the last 3 years, but 118%. If you waited for prices to come down, you had to wait 59 years for that to happen. Along the way, look at this 12%. Look at this 93% gain. Look at these big gains here. Look at these big gains here. Now, so what happened here? What went wrong? It'd be instructive to see what went wrong during this 5-year period of time where prices did decline significantly. So first off, I explained the inventory is very different. I explained the population is very different. But also, if you took a look at the gold bars here, that's builders putting up homes. Remember we discussed household formations. Those are the blue bars. Notice how builders were putting up a lot more homes than people were forming households. But the reason why the market's been so strong is because the amount of households being formed is much greater than builders putting up homes. So your demand greater than supply causes prices to rise. Now, we have good visibility into the future because builders can't suddenly start building an exorbitant amount of homes because it takes time to do that. You have to have the permit process. And we see these numbers remaining on a relatively low basis, 1.3, 1.4 million new construction homes. But we also know, based upon population, that formations will remain somewhat elevated. And of course, another factor is lending standards. Back here, you guys know this. It was, hey, fog up a mirror, or do you have a pulse? You can get a mortgage. No income, no asset, no job, no down payment, and not very good credit. Well, we all know that that's changed. So the game's changed. The demographics have changed. The supply and demand has changed. Yes, it is less affordable than it was, but this is the key point that I was trying to make, and this illustrates. Imagine a payment of $1,000, an income of $4,000. This is normal relationship. So a 40% rise in payment is $400 a month. That's a 40% rise. To offset this, to make $400 a month more, you just need a 10% rise in income. Now, look, this is an oversimplification. There's other things that come into play here, but this kind of just gives you an idea and a glimpse of where we are. Now, I'm going to show you here. I'm just going to skip to it so we could discuss what we had mentioned earlier with the cost of waiting and why that is such an important thing for us to take a look at here. So we know that in the current environment, 29% of buyers say they're competing for offers is one of the first or second barriers to purchase. So right now, over 30% of homes are bid over ask. I showed you the chart is 32%, 2.6 offers per listed home. So if someone were looking at a home for, well, this is a real case study, says why the numbers are the way they are, $630,000, and they got to go $15,000 above asking price to win the home. Take the emotion out of it. Mathematically, is it a good decision or not? So we have data for every marketplace. And what we could say is, look, we have to ask two questions. If you're sitting there and you're a buyer and you're in this predicament, the question you need to ask is, one, how long will it take me to break even? How long will it take for this home that's currently worth $630 to be worth $645? So what's my waiting period to break even? And then what happens in the future? So let's take a snapshot 5 years from now. So fortunately, you two gentlemen can answer those questions for people in every single zip code. In this particular example, it was 4.9 months because the 1-year forecasted appreciation is a little over 4%. But then if you take a look at what's anticipated for the next 5 years, 4.28% average per year, which is very much in line with the 63-year historical. And remember, you guys have the ability to show people listening all of this for every single zip code in the country. So what does that translate to? Well, it translates to a projected value of $783,000. You're paying $645. That gives you a profit of $138,000 in 5 years. So is it a good idea to spend $15,000 more? Maybe. Doesn't seem like it's bad, but this way you win the home. But this analysis should be done. And you could see it here. You're underwater $15,000 or 2.3% for the first 4.9 months. And then you start to climb and you start to improve. Now, the report looks something like this, and that's with 15,000. What if you had to go 30,000 over? Well, it would take 6.9 months, and what would happen is that you'd make, instead of 138, 123,000. But at least by doing things like this, you give individuals the benefit of making that evaluation. So there's one more. I was right on the next slide, so forgive me. I should have just went to it. And that is what we were just discussing. A rate above 7%, it's the best friend a buyer could have today. Because even though almost 40% say that waiting for lower rates is something that they're wanting to do, it's a mistake. because for every 1% drop, 5 million more people become eligible for the reasons we said. So let's do the math on this. See, it's important to do math. If you're looking at an $800,000 home, and you can do this in any zip code, and let's just say in this particular real case study, they were paying 1.5 points. They get 7.25. So I said, instead of buying today, I'll wait a year because I think rates, and we agree, we think rates are going to come down, let's say 6.25%. So that seems like a logical thing to wait to get that 6.25. It's a big savings in monthly payment. But what they forget is that the appreciation in this market is expected to go up by 4.69% over the next year. That would make the home more expensive, and to keep the same level of down payment and mortgage the same, you'd have to borrow more money, which means you'd still be cheaper waiting a year. You'd be cheaper by $241 a month. So let's say, okay, I pay the $241 extra for a year, and then I have to pay the cost to refinance. So by buying today instead of waiting, it's going to cost me almost $7,000 by doing so. So maybe it is smart to wait a year until we think about that appreciation, and not just the appreciation, the amortization, because just 4.69% on an $800,000 home is $37,000, and you would have amortized. That's the part of your mortgage payment that's your own money. It's like a forced savings plan. So you benefit $43,000. It costs you $7,000. This is wise to do this now rather than waiting.
Great answer, Barry. Really appreciate you breaking that down for the viewers in a way that was simple and easy to understand. So with that, hopefully you found some value in that portion of the episode. But as I mentioned earlier, this whole thing was cut from a longer episode where we discussed the idea of a housing crash, affordability, as well as the direction of mortgage rates. So if you want to see that full conversation, do me a favor and check out this video here.